Winfrey is a well-known American TV personality, actor, author, and entrepreneur. She's among the richest and most powerful black women on the planet. She's best known for hosting the Oprah Winfrey Show. She's also the founder and CEO of Oprah Winfrey Network. According to wealthyperson.com, she has a personal wealth of $3 billion, that's with a B, dollars. On her show, The Oprah Conversations, she said this.
I was going to say, and then I'll let you answer it. White people, there are white people who are not as powerful as the system of white people, the caste system that's been put in place, but they still, no matter where they are on the rung or the ladder of success, they still have their whiteness.
My interpretation of what Oprah Winfrey is saying is that no matter your lot in life, as long as you are white, you have an advantage over all other minorities, alluding to what is popularly known as white privilege. Now, some would say white privilege is the very foundation of the systemic racism operating throughout American society, if not the world. It is what holds minorities back from success and is something for minorities to overcome, especially around election time. I would think Oprah Winfrey is the living argument against the notion that white privilege hinders minority progress. She, along with certain athletes, pop stars, and celebrities who have all made it big in America while denouncing America, are, ironic? Oxymoronic? That may be partially right. I'm going to look at this term white privilege and debunk it after this word from my sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Black History Quiz, because it takes more than a month to learn our history. History is not black and white. It's complicated. America was built on slave labor, yet blacks owned slaves as well. The Republican Party was founded to abolish slavery, but today most blacks vote Democrat. And sometimes, just sometimes, African kings marry white. No matter the race, people are complicated, filled with contradictions, and change with the times. To view history through the lenses of today's culture cheats the learner of the full story. Black History Quiz is a newsletter that shares facts you might not have learned in school and certainly did not learn from mainstream media. Black History Quiz educates, sparks debate, and often puts history in a brand new light. Visit blackhistoryquiz.com and subscribe to the weekly newsletter. No matter your perspective of history, you will not be disappointed. Black History Quiz. White privilege. Let's start with a definition. Dictionary.com says this, quote, white privilege is the unearned, mostly unacknowledged social advantage white people have over racial groups simply because they are white, end quote. For me to accept that white privilege exists, I would have to believe that all white people live the same lives, but they do not. Pre-coronavirus, I bet you could drive around any major city and see white homeless people, white people working minimum wage jobs, and white executives in corporate offices. And if you were in a city with a major black population, like Atlanta, you would see black people that were homeless, black people working minimum wage jobs, and you would also see black executives in corporate offices. Assuming that all white people are doing well and all black people are doing poorly is a racist assumption, because it suggests that one race tends to be superior than the other. And yet, assumptions about race are promoted all the time, even when you don't realize it. Let me give you a quote from this website, The Root. Now, the article is entitled, "Hey Media, White People Are Poor Too." And although it was posted back in December 2013, it is still very relevant today. Fact: most poor people in the United States are white. According to census figures in 2013, 18.9 million whites are poor. That's 8 million more poor white people than poor black people, and more than 5 million more than those who identify as Latino. A majority of those benefiting from programs like food stamps and Medicaid are white too. But somehow our picture of poverty is different, and the media tends to tell us a different story. A recent New York Times story, Cut in Food Stamps Forces Hard Choices on Poor, included only pictures of African Americans and Latinos from the Bronx, New York, and a number of southern states. In October, the Times published another story about the impact of states' rejection of the Medicaid expansion as part of the Affordable Care Act. The images accompanying that story were also all of Black or Latino families. Was that because only Blacks and Latinos received Medicaid? No. So why didn't the Times include a picture like this one? And it shows a picture of a white crowd. They're all white. They're organizing to raise poverty wages in Wisconsin, and they're all in need of Medicaid. Now, further down in the article, it reads this. The traditional media's one-sided image of poverty has contributed to the misconception that most poor people are Black and that most Black people are poor, although more than 70% are not. If most of the poor people in America are white, then how could there be any claim of white privilege? Now, again, that article was from 2013, so let's fast forward a bit to the year 2019. And Bernie Sanders is running for president of the United States, and during a debate, he said this.
I was with some young people active in the Black Lives Matter movement. Young lady comes up to me and she says, "You don't understand what police do in communities. You don't understand the degree to which we are terrorized." And I'm not just talking about the horrible shootings that we have seen, which have got to end, and we've got to hold police officers accountable. I'm just talking about everyday activities where police officers are bullying people. So to answer your question, I would say, and I think it's similar to what the secretary said, when you're white, you don't know what it's like to be living in a ghetto. You don't know what it's like to be poor.
Well, that comment set off a flurry of controversy, the least of which was a popular internet meme. Now, in this meme, this picture, it's a picture of Bernie Sanders and the quote, "When you're white, you don't know what it's like to be poor." And on the meme are different pictures of very poor white people. And at the bottom of the image is a caption that read, 70% of Americans in poverty are white. And people pass this around all over the place. Now, when I saw it, or when I thought about it again recently, I thought, wow, is that true? Well, I looked into it, and it depends on who you ask. The website PolitiFact investigated the claim that 70% of Americans in poverty are white. And in doing so, they reached out to Poverty Solutions, an initiative at the University of Michigan aimed at preventing and alleviating poverty. They pointed them to the most recent report on income and poverty from the U.S. Census Bureau that was released in September 2018. According to the report, nearly 39.7 million people were living in poverty in the United States in 2017. And of that group, 17 million were non-Hispanic whites. That means that non-Hispanic whites accounted for 42% of all people living in poverty. PolitiFact also looked into a 2012 Census Bureau presentation slide. And that presentation slide said, "Are most people in poverty white?" Now, according to the slide, which looked at data from 1960 to 2011, 31.7 million whites were living in poverty at the end of the time period being studied. That compared to 14.5 million non-whites. Now, that would mean that about 69% of those living in poverty then were white. As true as that was, there was a catch. 67% of all the people living in poverty were white alone. But looking at white alone, not Hispanic, the percentage dropped to 41% living in poverty. So all that means is if you count the Hispanics who identify as white, then nearly 70% of people in poverty are white. If you count non-Hispanic whites, the number is around 40%. Whether you count whites in poverty at 40% or 70%, either way, it dispels the notion that white people have privilege, yes, because if they have privilege, why would they be living in poverty? Well, that depends on who you ask. I have the impression that many opinion leaders who happen to be white do not want to discuss poor white people in America because it undermines their white supremacy narratives. It also reveals, I think, their own racist ideals, which is this. There are two kinds of white people in America. The normal white people you see in government, the media, and living the great American dream. And there are what some people call white trash. I read this very interesting article on NPR the other day called, "Why is it still okay to trash poor white people?" I almost want to read the entire article to you. Instead, I will share just a few passages that really resonated with me. By accepting the idea that white trash exists, people are tacitly accepting that there is another, different kind of whiteness. Normal white people, the ones who aren't white trash, embody all the things white trash can't. They're hardworking, educated, classy, kind and good. Anyone who doesn't conform to those values can't ever really be fully white, hence white trash. Further down in the article it reads, Nancy Eisenberg, the author of White Trash, the 400-year untold history of class in America, says that tension between normal and pathological whiteness played out during the 2016 presidential campaign. When Donald Trump was criticized for making racist and sexist comments, Eisenberg says the media tried to portray his supporters as white trash, as opposed to ordinary, upstanding white people. The problem with the white trash reference is often it becomes an easy way to dismiss a group and to generalize, Eisenberg says. Even though exit polls have shown that white people of all class and education backgrounds voted for Trump in the general election, Eisenberg says it's the people pegged as poor and working class whites wearing red Bubba hats and cheering at rallies who get burdened with negative associations. She says we talk about those white folks as a group that doesn't deserve to be heard from, either because we don't like them because they're poor and they're violent, or we want to claim that they're the most racist group in society. The argument of white privilege urges people to accept that merely being white gives you, as Oprah Winfrey and others would say, a distinct advantage over minorities. For that logic to work, one would have to dismiss the existence of millions of poor white people in America. One would also have to ignore Jay-Z, Kanye West, Michael Jordan, David Stewart, and Robert F. Smith because, like Oprah Winfrey, they are also African American. You would also have to ignore about 35,000 other black people, which is about 8% of the African American population in the United States. Why ignore those 35,000 black people? Well, those 35,000 black people are millionaires. You have been listening to the Things I Think About podcast. If you love what you heard, hate what you heard, or don't know what you just heard, I want to know about it. Drop me an email. I can be reached at Jim Stroud, that's JIMSTROUD, at jimstroud.com. So, until next time, Bye bye.